And some of the British wartime singles, I mean, you fill the bottom of the engine up with sand and they'll still run.
Really?
Oh yeah, they just keep going. They'll run terribly, but they will go. Right, things to check if you're buying a bike. Obviously make sure the brakes work. You can't get into the drums to see what condition they're in, but on a modern bike with discs you can see the thickness of the disc and you can generally see the thickness of the pads. So if you're buying something, you want to try and keep your costs down as low as you can, obviously. So if the brakes look shot, you don't have to walk away, but you've got to factor that into your pricing.
Yeah.
Same as tyres. Are the tyres any good? Because on one of these you're talking about £100 a tyre. On a modern bike you're probably talking £200 a tyre.
What's the telltale signs of the tyres being shot then?
Well, any cracks around the sidewalls if they're really old, especially on an old bike, any cracks around these sidewalls, any cracks in between these, and obviously the depth of your tread. If they're really old, they've got quite a radius on them, but you can end up with a flat spot in the middle where they're worn out. Engine wise on an old bike, just kick it over slowly, just going like that. If the big ends are knackered, the big end, well, your crank goes round, big end's on the bottom of the conrod. It's quite common on an old bike for the bearings to be gone. So as you're rolling it over, you'll hear it go clonk clonk, clonk clonk. Walk away from that unless you factor it in again, because it's an expensive exercise to rebuild the crankshaft.
Yeah.
Tappet noise you can normally adjust out, unless, like this one, the valves and guides were shot, but you won't really know that unless you can physically see them. Like on these, you can take your rocker covers off, your tappet covers off, you can physically turn the engine over until there's your gap is there, and you can grab the bottom of the valve.
Okay.
And if it's flapping around, then you know you've got to again do that. But you know, a lot of older stuff, they're not like the tolerances on a modern bike. I mean, one of these, and some of the British wartime singles, I mean, you fill the bottom of the engine up with sand and they'll still run.
Really?
Oh yeah, they just keep going. They'll run terribly, but they will go. Basically, engine is all about noise. You know, you can hear if something's clanging and banging around horribly, then you just... Depends how rare the bike is. You either factor it into your pricings or you walk away. I mean, Malcolm's was making a noise. We knew the valve stem was gone, the valve guide was gone, but when we stripped it down, they all needed doing, which is sensible to do at the time. Make sure it starts, obviously. A lot of the older bikes, you probably want the guy who owns it, because there'll be a quirky nature to starting it, you know. Like Velocets, you can kick them all day long unless you know how to start them, they won't go. You've got to get your decompression lever in the right place, you know, kick it over and they'll go. Oil return's quite important. So on a Harley, start the bike up, your oil level, you'll see it frothing back out the dipstick hole.
Okay.
Just little air bubbles in the oil, so you know that's returning. On a lot of the British bikes, you have a tank here, take the lid off, run it up, and there'll be a return tube that goes back into the oil tank. Make sure you're getting oil back out of that. Again, check your lighting system through, because some of the wiring parts can be expensive, especially dynamos and things like that. They can add up to quite a lot of money to get rebuilt. And a visual check over, like, no disrespect to Malcolm, but the frame on this was cracked. You've got to look for anything like that. Stand at the back of the bike. If it's got a centre stand, put it on the centre stand, and you can see, look down the wheels, see if they're like that.
Yeah.
See if the frame's bent anywhere. Any kinks around the headstock. Like, you can't really, these don't really equate because it's a big lump of cast, but your tubes that go into there and tubes that go into there, if you smack one of these or any old bike really hard, the tubes will put a kink in the tubes. so then you know your frame's bent. Just like I say, a general visual, sit on it, make sure you're happy with the way the forks look. You know, that's all pointing straight ahead, the bars aren't bent. You can't really see, but on the British bikes a bit more, you've got more room to see everything. You can see if things just don't look right, because if they don't look right, it's generally a fair indicator they're not right. Check your lights, check your battery, anything that's going to cost you money really.
Is it like a telltale sign to stuff like walk away, just walk away?
Oh yeah, I mean if the frame's cracked or bent or anything like that, yeah, just don't go there. Don't go there. And again, for me personally, if I was buying something old, if the engine's banging and rattling away, it doesn't bother me doing the work, but it's expensive.
Yeah.
You know, if you're paying 10 grand for a bike and it's going to cost you another 2 grand to rebuild the engine, you want it for 8 grand.
Mm.
It's all about factoring in, like I say, you know, everything. Everybody wants top dollar for everything, but you've got to be realistic. If you're looking at Harleys, you want to try and keep, if it's a military one, you want to try and get all the right bits on it if you can. Like the air filters are expensive. None of it's massively expensive, but it all adds up. Like you want your carriers on it and your ammo boxes, and if you can get a spot lamp, make sure the rear rack's on it, the correct rear lights. There's 2 odd ones on there, but it doesn't matter. Your rear carrier, the rear stands on these always break, so don't fret about that. And like I say, you can buy everything. So,
is there anything like, for example, that might look bad, but don't worry too much about it? I mean, you're talking about the rear stand. It's not something to fret about.
No, you can buy them. They're not. The originals were never any good, but they were a lot better than the repros.
Yeah.
So what a lot of people do is weld these in, which is what I've done for Malcolm, just to stop it doing that. Obviously chain is another thing to look at. Does the speedo work? Especially if it's an original one. If you want it absolutely all singing, all dancing, things like the footboard rubbers all worn out, it all costs money. But again, so many of these are out there that have had bits nailed on them, and you just got to go for a sort of happy medium with them.
Yeah.
You know. And again, unless you really study these things, like I don't know what mark that is, it goes from Mark 1 to Mark 7 I think on these, different colour engine case. This is a later one, so it's got green engine casings. But like I say, on that liberator.de, they tell you what air filter it should have on it for that year, and you know, all that sort of stuff. But the chances of finding one that are original are just very minimal, because I mean, then however many years old they are, and they're military, they'd have just been slung in a ditch and somebody would have picked them up. And
I mean, it's just always the worry that when you go to buy anything, you're going to pick up some turkey, aren't you, really?
Yeah, that's it. Basically, bent frame, cracked frame, any untoward horrible engine noises. Does it go in and out of gear when you start it? Does the clutch feel alright? Obviously, if you can test ride it. Make sure it goes in and out of all the gears, and then has it got any power? You know, because you could ride it and it might tick over lovely, but you get it out on the road and it's just gutless. Yeah. Because all the rings are shot or the valves are shot or something. But I mean, generally, if you just wanted to buy one, a bit like Danny with his red one, he got a good deal there. It was a sensible bike. Needed bits doing, which we went through and told him about. A lot of these things, if people are riding them, they're generally reasonably okay, you know.
It's the ones that have been set up for a long period of time. Can be,
or you're buying a box of bits, but then you've got a chance to view it all properly, so that's not the end of the world. Yeah, I mean, if you can ride it. That's the answer to that. But the things to walk away from are bent frames. Even buckled wheels can end up being expensive. and any really untoward engine noises, then there's enough of them out there to go, right, he wants 15 grand for that, but it needs that doing, or I found another one for 14, or I found another one for 16, that doesn't need anything doing.
And all these bikes rattle and make a lot of noise anyway, don't they?
Oh God, yeah.
So there's engine noise, and then there's just general rattling noise.
Malcolm's one was rattling. It's so much quieter now the valves are done.
But everything needs tightening up all the time, doesn't it?
Oh God, yeah. Yeah, you just got to keep them. But like I say, if you use them regularly and just keep an eye on them, they're fine. Yeah, they're fine. You've got to remember, it's how many years old is it? It's 1944, that one, so it's
80 odd years old.
80 odd years old, yeah. Yeah, it's just, what do you expect from an 80-year-old motorbike, really?
Yeah.
I'm 50 and I don't work.
Next week on the workshop.
If you're ever doing one of these, never try and line it up with a bonnet catch on. Always take the bonnet catch off.
Okay.
Because you're trying to get it straight, but then that'll pull it off centre, so you set that up last.
Oh, okay.